Africa, where the human race began. Nearly 1 billion people live here. And it's a continent with an incredible diversity of communities and cultures. Yet we know less of its history than almost anywhere else on Earth. But that's beginning to change. In the last few decades, researchers and archaeologists have begun to uncover a range of histories as impressive and extraordinary as anywhere else on Earth. It's a history which has been neglected for years, and it's largely without written records. But it is preserved for us in the gold and statues, in the culture, art, and legends of the people. My name is Gus Casely Hayford. Over many years, I've studied the history and culture of Africa. As an art historian, I'm used to drawing stories from mute objects from the past. I'm going to discover the history and find out what really happened to the lost kingdoms of Africa. We're pushing northwards along the Nile, some 700 miles from Khartoum and less than 200 from the Egyptian border. Our destination is the small town of Kerma, which sits by the Nile. This was once the capital of the kingdom which the Egyptians knew as Kush. This was the heart of the kingdom of Nubia. Over the last few decades, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of an impressive city here, dating from around 2000 BC. This extraordinary structure looms like a man-made mountain over the ruins.
Kerma, it's kind of a development of the community who make the rock art. So we have here like more organization.
At the heart of this great city was a huge mud brick structure known as the Dafufa. It's the oldest known mud brick building in Africa and one of the largest. But it has no rooms. It's a solid block of masonry.
They've actually built a piece of geography because it's absolutely solid mud. And what is it, and what might it have been used for?
I believe that it's something associated with rituals. It's something like a temple or something like this.
We don't know who the god or gods were that these people worshipped, but according to Mahmud, it was the temple on the top of the Dafufa which was the main focus here. It was surrounded by palaces for royalty or priests.
Now we are on the top of the Dafufa.
Yes.
And you can see surrounding the Dafufa is the administration city of Kerma.
So these are the raised foundations of...
The foundation of the buildings.
I see.
Has been found here, and this is kind of a reconstruction of the foundation to show us the plans of this building.
I see.
Judging by the buildings that the archaeologists have uncovered in the last 10 years, Kerma was not so much a residential city as a place of pilgrimage where people would come from miles around for ceremonies. Then, of course, it would have looked very different.
And it's easy to forget, but all of this was really green.
Yes, it's more green, and it's surrounded by green, and so there is enough food, enough water.
So it could have been a fairly wealthy area.
It's really developed a very strong kingdom at that time. So all these economical sources supported the state to be very strong state.
There's a small museum here with some of the finds from the excavations which give a flavour of the Nubian culture. And even when it's laid out like this, with the artefacts numbered off and catalogued, you can see quite how distinctive it is. Take the pottery. Archaeologists now know that people were making pottery here even before they began to plant crops, and long before ancient Egypt. The polished surfaces and black rims imitate the forms of polished drinking gourds I've seen and used elsewhere in Africa. It's extremely finely made, but it's done entirely by hand. They weren't using a potter's wheel for this. And the extraordinary thing is that this technique can still be found today, 4,000 years on. Everywhere you go around here, you see these characteristic water jars. They aren't mass-produced in a factory. Instead, they're made by women in a local village.
Just gathering some goat poo, I think it is, which apparently is used in the mixture with the clay. And this is a village across the Nile from where we've been staying, where they create these amazing clay pots, and we're being shown by one of the local women how they actually do that from the point of kneading the clay to the finished product.
I've done some pottery myself, and I know from hard experience that this technique is actually extremely difficult. It's as sophisticated as the mud brick architecture of the Dufufa. This technique may be ancient, but it's perfectly adapted to the conditions here. The red slip is designed to get the surface of the pot just right, porous enough for slow evaporation to keep the contents cool. These continuities of tradition and practice are an even more important insight into the culture of ancient Nubia, because the Nubians of Kerma never developed writing. But archaeology has revealed some more astonishing insights into this ancient city. This is where the Nubians of Kerma buried their dead. The cemetery was first excavated by an American-led team in 1913. What they uncovered told an astonishing story.
We are in what we call the Eastern Cemetery. This is the cemetery belong to the Kerma.
We're standing on the edge of what was once an enormous funeral mound, nearly 100 meters across. The center's marked by a mysterious white rock, and there's a kind of smooth avenue which crosses the space. It's a huge area, and it seems to be the burial mound of a king. But he wasn't buried alone.
Within this, we have the human sacrifices inside. And so you can see the importance of the person has been buried here.
How many people were sacrificed?
More than 300 person has been buried as a human sacrifice.
The archaeologists think that the victims, men, women, and children too, were sacrificed to provide servants and retainers for their master in the life beyond. The vast cemetery itself was used for over 1,000 years and contains over 30,000 graves.
It must have been quite an eerie and melancholy place. I mean, if anything is going to really make you think about life and death, it's a place like this.
Archaeologists have also found something which ties Kerma directly to the people of the rock art: cattle.
Around on the edges of the mound,
Yes.
5,000 cattle skulls has been found on this edge of the tombs.
So this would be a king or something. I mean, 5,000 cattle would have. I mean, were these cattle that were slaughtered especially for?
Yes.
To commemorate the death of this person?
Exactly, and it's part of the offering has been offered with this person.
Wealth is measured in cattle.
Yes, during that time, yes, absolutely yes. And cattle was just the main things. We can find that in the Kerma culture in many aspects.
But if
that many cattle, that many people are being sacrificed for one person. One, it suggests they were incredibly powerful. And two, that there must have been an enormous cattle culture here and probably a big population that supported. I mean, that really does get me thinking in a different way about Kerma. I mean, this was an enormous civilization.
It's a real kingdom.
The scale and relative sophistication of the Nubian civilization here in Kerma led Western archaeologists in colonial Sudan to assume that this culture must have been brought in from Egypt or elsewhere. But now it's believed that this was an indigenous development, a civilization created by the descendants of the people who created the rock art. "4,000 years after it was built, the people of Kerma still gather like ghosts around the temple at the Dufufa. Although the Nubian kingdom is long gone, it still exerts a pull. And these ruins have really affected me. In a sense, Kerma is the lost kingdom that I'd always dreamt of seeing. It's every bit as spectacular as anything that I've seen in Egypt. 4,000 years ago, the Nubians of Kerma were apparently thriving, with their great mud brick monument, their herds of cattle, and a sizable population. So why did they disappear, and where did they go?